Well, my name is Dave Denny, and I am Cupertino's Poet Laureate, and I'm joined today by the other South Bay Area Laureates here to celebrate the publication of our new anthology and to just have a little party and a reading with all of you on a nice Saturday afternoon. So welcome, and thank you all for making time in your day for poetry. I want to make a quick announcement here. We are searching for my replacement. It's an odd way to start a reading, but as you might know, the Poet Laureate traditionally is a 2-year term, and then someone new from the community comes in, and it's a kind of a rotating position. So we are on the look for poets. If you are a poet, if you are interested, if you know someone who's a poet who might be interested in this position, I can tell you from my own experience, it's been a completely positive thing. It's just been a wonderful experience, a great way to serve the community, to honor poetry, and to encourage people in their creativity, and to spread some joy in the literary arts in our community. So our deadline for the Cupertino Poet Laureate is July 26th. You can get applications in City Hall or online at the city's website. So we welcome you. If you are a poet, again, or if you know someone who is, encourage them, if you would, to apply. They have until July 26th. There is also, at this time, being launched a major search for our new county poet laureate. Sally Ashton is now the laureate emeritus, the second of our county laureates to finish her tenure, and the county is also on a search, and I'm going to allow Sally, when she comes up and makes her introductory comments, to give you some details on that. We want to start by thanking our sponsors. This is a sort of a multi-sponsored event. We want to thank Poetry Center San Jose and the City of Cupertino, the city's Library Commission, the Library Foundation, and Friends of the Cupertino Library. All of those folks support us and support you, and they are behind us, propping us up today and always. Let me give you an overview of the agenda, just so you know what to expect this afternoon. We'll be reading from our new book, which is called Local Habitations. I've scanned the cover up on the overhead, and we've got freshly signed copies. So today only, you can buy this book for a nice even $10. Bargain price for today only, and each copy that you buy today has all 5 of our signatures in it. So we invite you to, during the break or afterwards, go ahead and get yourself a copy. The holidays are just around the corner, aren't they? There are lots others that you could buy for. I also want to let you know that you can buy these online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at Robertson Publishing. So if you know someone who lives far away, who can't make it today, but who would like a copy, they're readily available online. So we will read there are 5 of us, so we're going to put 3 up to bat here initially. Then we'll take a break, about 15 minutes, so that you can get some refreshments. We have coffee and tea and water and some fresh homemade cookies made by my friend Mary Spagnol. And so we'll have cookies and snacks for about 15 minutes. And then 2 additional readers will come up. And then we have kind of a special treat for today. We have each agreed to write 100 words of a poem that we're calling Local Habitations. None of us have seen the other person's 100 words, and we are going to, at some point today, randomly decide the order in which we each read our 100 words. So you'll be here for an original, one-time only, spontaneous poetic event. Will be just as surprised as anybody to see what one another has written, but we're looking forward to that, and we'll do that as a kind of wrap-up or a finale. This idea comes to us from our beloved friend Nils Peterson, the first Poet Laureate of Santa Clara Valley. The project was his idea. He got us going. He spearheaded the event, and we're going to let him be our leadoff hitter today. As you know, in baseball, the leadoff hitter is your most dependable guy. He's the guy that gets up there and gets on base, and Nils does that every single time. So we're going to let him lead. Nils Peterson is Professor Emeritus of English and Humanities at San Jose State University. In 2009, he was chosen the first Poet Laureate of Santa Clara County. He has published poetry, science fiction, and articles on subjects as varied as golf and Shakespeare. His newest collection is A Walk to the Center of Things. Please welcome Nils Peterson.
Between the chair and here, I have to make up my mind what I'm going to read, and I'm here, and I haven't altogether done that yet, so this will be more of a surprise than... I'm going to start... My selections were based on the fact that if you get the book and read a little introduction, each one of us wrote a little introduction to our section. My selection was based on the fact that I've written poems published for more than 50 years. And so I am trying to think of which ones, and the sense that poems need new audiences, or they wither away. So I was trying to think about which poems of mine might find the benefit of a new audience. So I'm going to, that was my theory of choice. So these are some poems some of which I've written quite a long time ago. But I'm going to begin with a strange one. They all are, but this is called The Family Tree, and it started one January when all of a sudden I realized I had to go out and mow the lawn. And this was when I was newly in California. It struck me as being a weird thing to have to do. And so I wondered what I really wanted to do, and that was sleep. And then I wondered why I wanted to sleep. And I said, I really want to hibernate. And then I said, why would I want to hibernate? It must be because I have bear blood in me. Well, how did I get bear blood in me? And then this poem poured forth from that. Family Tree. I picture her, my great-great-great-grandmother, say, in the long Arctic summer dusk, where the light, refusing to give over, keeps on to midnight and beyond. I'm Swedish. This woman, bored with husband, farmers' wives, bored with gleaming copper and bright aprons, irritated with the neat parlor, freed only for the prison of the pastor's visit, this woman longs for darkness. Tonight she's done her chores, swept the kitchen, prepared the dough, milked the cows, fed the chickens, hauled the water, and still the light will not be quiet. So she says to herself, Jag tror jag ska gå till skogen. I think I'll go into the woods. Kan hända jag möter ett troll. Perhaps I'll meet a troll. She had heard of women carried off for troll wives. Even that would be better. To be one of the queer ones whose eyes never rest on things but look just beyond, whose hearts settle at last into real stone instead of just the pain of stone. So she takes off her apron, fixes her hair, and sets off down a road that dwindles to a trail that sneaks into a wood. For a while she whistles because boys can whistle but girls must sing. But as the trees close over and in, the only sound she makes is the little catch that happens at the base of the throat when the heart beats too quickly. She shivers in her thin summer dress as the cold, lingering close to the ground from the winter before reaches up to her and at her. At last the trail runs out of itself, and she stands irresolute, weight thrusting on one foot, then the other. Should she press forward where no one has been before? Maybe it was silly. Maybe she should turn around. Maybe there are no trolls. She stands there deep in wish as will can carry. until a low rumble, and she turns to an upswelling of blackness that rears and spreads its paws so wide the rank blanket of underfur seems a door she can enter, a dark door which closes fiercely around as an immensity gathers her in against itself. At last, it drops back to its four paws and lumbers off impervious to thorn or thicket or the soft sobbing of my grandmother. Now, just another hurt girl sitting amidst the ruin of her clothing, able to think of nothing else to do but go back home and wait for the year to fall about her. All winter she thickened sleepily in the warm cave of her husband's pride in having fathered at last. When the lambs dropped in spring, she bore a lump all suet and hair, which she licked into a human shape. In her after sleep, she called out Bear, and her husband said, Bjorn. Yes, we'll call him Bjorn. Bjorn is Swedish for bear. So this is, among other things, a poem about feminism. It's a poem about the creative process, which is always a meeting of the divine with the human. An ancestor of this poem would be Yeats's marvelous poem, Leda and the Swan, in which all the history unfolds itself from that one event, and in a way the history of my family unfolds itself from that one event. My father was bear-like in shape and form, and so it was so strange to me that as I thought about the poem, that it came from my mother instead, my mother's side, actually. So I think it's right. I think, that at the heart of a lot of writing is that discontent, that dissatisfaction with everything that is about you, and the desire for something. So I will read a lighter one at this point, I think. A moment of recovery here. Erica actually asked for this. This is called The Thing of Beauty. My father could not give it away, the Stromberg Carlson, when the tubes failed. The age of the console radio had passed, nor could he throw it away because the wood was so beautiful. He who had worked in the cabinet maker's shop as a young man loved the grain of hardwoods with his eye and hand. So it was moved into my bedroom where it sat, a mahogany god no one heard. When I grew older, I hid books, risque, not pornographic, Thorne Smith, The Affairs of Bellamy, Maupassant, and the like, in among the tubes, my secret cave like the mine where the Lone Ranger cast his silver bullets. For my 13th birthday, my parents thought a reader like me could use a desk, so in the night they came and carried out the radio to put in the desk. My books fell on the floor like original sin. The beginning of my 14th year was not a happy one. My delights confiscated. As I walked about the house, I felt as if I had been exiled to an obscure but Lutheran Elba. I knew then I'd never fit into a desk job. Later, I found the books in my father's own secret cave, up in the ceiling boards of the basement. So I had another, though not public, lending library. Maybe the books were like the radio, something in them so beautiful, my father could not throw them away. Then I'll read this one because I think it's a necessary poem for our age. This is called, this is a political poem, just so you understand where it's going. I was unconfident, that's why I named it that way. This is based on an incident of a wonderful book called Piano Shop on the Left Bank. 3 people stand in the shop in Paris looking at an old piano. It might have been played by Beethoven, The veneer is sumptuous, though blistered where separating from the shaped pieces. Inside, no cast iron frame, but thick wooden struts. The woman attempts a scale, but many of the notes are missing. It's like trying to capture moonlight in a net. The man marvels at the piano's age and that it had been made entirely by hand. The shop owner tells them the trees for the wood were most likely planted in the late 16th century. The woodworking guilds of Germany planted trees so their children's children would have the right kind of wood, harvested sometimes 250 years later. Then it was cured from 10 to 40 years. Even in the 19th century, such wood was rare, but now it is a substance that has gone out of the world we live in. It'd be nice to be thinking about planting cheese for our children 250 years from now. So I guess I have time for one more here. Oh, well, maybe this one will do. Have to. It's called Philosophy of Life 201. It was a required class from my college days. We all had to take Philosophy of Life. In that class, we were taught the attributes of God: omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. Out to the driveway for the paper this morning, there a hawk in a nimbus of dove feathers. At my footfall, he speared the carcass and carried it off. Almost Advent. I've been brooding over that story, the conception and birth, yes, but thinking of what's to come, thinking God would have had to play fair and not choose the life his son would lead. He would have had to watch from the sidelines, caught in time like the rest of us. Oh, perhaps he loaded the dice a little, good parents, a decent synagogue, but to make sense, the way of Jesus must have been of his own choosing. Now I'm brooding on hawk and dove, guessing God did not bring them together, though each woke with a morning hunger. Hard to blame the Creator for that, if one likes the idea of creation. The hawk could have swung toward a mountain mouse. The dove could have chosen another driveway. His eye on the sparrow speaks of attention, not control. So this morning I'm letting God off the hook, giving up on omniscience and omnipresence, giving up on omniscience and omnipotence, though I seem to cling to omnipresence. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nils. I think he may have read that because I've told him that's my favorite poem of his. I just love the way it resolves there. It's such a gracious thing to give God a break now and then. By the way, there are many more Nils Peterson poems in our book. Time for a shameless plug, and if you'd like one, they're only $10, and at the break, you'll have a chance to go over to the table and enjoy even more Nils Peterson poems. Parthenia Hicks is the Poet Laureate Emeritus of Los Gatos, the recipient of the Robinson Jeffers Tourhouse Poetry Prize, the Arts Council Silicon Valley Fellowship, the Villa Montalvo Poetry Prize, and several pushcart nominations. She is the owner of Tribewater Editorial Services and the poetry editor of the Enlightenment Journal. She teaches writing workshops privately, is a jewelry maker and beater. I've seen her jewelry. It's amazing. You might want to talk to her at the break. And blogs at the Red Room for Writers. Please welcome Parthenia Hicks.
Thank you so much, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be a part of this day, and I just publicly want to thank Nils Peterson for this wonderful idea of bringing us all together in this way. So thank you, our dear Nils. Well, It's a challenge to follow on the footsteps of Nils, but I'm going to give it my best. He spoke so well about why he chose the poems that he did, and I'm afraid that I have to say I tried not to select the most depressing ones, and I tried not to select poems that would put me in the position of standing up here and saying, well, I'm sorry this is really so dark and so sad. But in the end, I selected poems that, for me personally, had a story behind them. I mean, my personal story about writing them. So I'm going to begin. As a poet, you frequently are asked, what made you begin to write? And so I actually wrote this poem in response to that question. Watching my mother read the newspaper. She seemed alone in the late morning light, turned to the silence of dark miniature marks with their backbones, curling tails, and dashed lines across their middles. Thin, crackling paper with hardly any white space that she held up high, her hands a yard apart, her head hidden somewhere behind this dappled veil, traveling beyond the space between us. On the floor across the room, with a doll as tall as my scary self, a cap gun and a cowgirl skirt, a baby sister screaming nearby, I watched with a jealous heart. Then slipped, like an Indian brave, up, underneath the dangerous paper, up, underneath the ink of her flowing braids, into the hollow of her arm, carefully, not wanting to lose at this. Show me, I said, show me the marks. And I think I will just stay in the place of mother for another minute here. Mama's silver maple. You locked yourself in the bedroom the morning they plowed your silver maple. The electricity of your grief sparking onto us. Through the screen door, we watched, powerless owners of nothing, as the metal jaws hacked at her, bent her, crushed the blooming emerald and silver leaves, shook her like a wild dog with a cat in the shameless gluttony of the kill. We covered our ears as she groaned, ran toward your locked castle as she fell, hysterical in our longing, trying the handle one at a time, pushing our fingers under the door, groping for you, unable to save you or the silver maple. In the draining evening light, we lay upon each other like puppies, new light falling on us from the empty place in the sky. Let's see. And my next poem was written, well, several of my poems are ekphrastic in nature, and that means that I'm writing in response to another kind of art form. And in this case, this particular poem was written in response to a photograph by local photographer Ken Bloomfield. Cherokee Walking Wide Meditation. In the corner of my red eye, your crimson robe calls me in, like a red-tailed hawk circling a powwow on Mother's Day. Your essence blesses me, and I toe-heel my way onto your road. The temple is close. Your feet become mine, dusting the blonde dirt. My hands hold the prayer beads that you count behind your back. I'm inside your shining head, listening to your mantra that I paint onto my forehead like a warrior's third eye. My fingers move the Rudakshra beads through yours. The temples are full of ash and old tires. Once in a while, a fire is good. I can tell you are smiling, although your face is hidden. Okay. One more ekphrastic poem. This poem was written in response to a painting by the late Kate Curry, another local artist. And this actually was written in response to one of her paintings, and I believe it was one of the last exhibitions she had before she passed. So I feel very honored to have been invited to write a poem in response to her work. Enchanted Forest. The thing that sits at the edge of the forest marks the time, like the rings on a tree doesn't know if it should enter. The thing that sits in the sky marks the breath, the wind shuffling, loose poppies and rambling leaves, enchantment wild and hungry for itself. The thing that hides on the floor thickens the path, stumbles and tangles itself. The thing that touches the skin disappears when you turn around. Maiden hair, heart's tongue, rattlesnake and resurrection. The vine that wraps around an arm, pulls and knots up the story, makes a place to sit. Elephant's foot, matrimony, and wandering Jew. The thing that sits in the dark woods at night scurries, shivers, and moans, doesn't take its eye off the moon, flattens itself into moldy sleep in its thistle bed of nightshade, dandelion, buttercup, hemlock. The thing that survives sits in the mango light of dawn, the lime of new bud curling. Okay, I have to tell you that when I got up this morning, I started organizing my poems, and I did it about 4 times. Trying to decide what to read. And a little bit of it is standing up here and feeling the particular energy of the particular audience. So let me see, I think I'm going to just stay right with my last set of poems. This poem came to me, it's a response to a dream, a nighttime dream. I write a lot, frequently, in response to my nighttime dreams. Doppelganger. Alana DeVita spoons raw sugar into her English breakfast, thinks about adding soy, dreams at night of returning to her town, going home to Dresden in 1945, long before she was born, sees herself inching along mud-covered roads beside other ghostly, speechless survivors. Some days start with Dickinson and Whitman, ricochet to Plath and Elie Wiesel. She makes a map of Buchenwald, knows exactly where someone slept. sees the shoes that split over ballooning feet, holds her sides and feels the knotty bones. Some days she doesn't eat, will not speak, is on the inside looking in, winces as planes fly over San Jose. Post-traumatic stress disorder from scenes she has lived in sleep. Night terrors of body parts, pyramids of open mouths. She thinks she carries it in her cells. Her therapist says, well, maybe that's true. Her doctor says, write it down. Her friends say, wash it down with wine. She puts her head to pillows lightly, prays to Kuan Yin and Jesus, remembers Paul. The end of the war will never come, never come. So that's actually one of my personal recurring dreams. And when Nils spoke of sometimes we're writing in response to our deep internal discontent, that's one of those poems. So, and now, am I doing okay on time? Okay. So for my last poem, if you have ever sat in vigil with a dying creature, then you know that it is a huge challenge, but it's also a great gift and a blessing. Salamander. The shredded sky pours flames of light through the afternoon. The obsessive road crawls with steel and metal containers, the buzzing of bees buried in the honking crisscrossing of the dragon day. For 14 hours, a lone salamander bears the fire of wheels crushing gravel, stays ruefully alive on the tufts of a kitchen towel in a cardboard box. On the minute, she lifts her head, opens her mouth in wide, silent scream, rests, then tries again, lost to the powers of regeneration, reduced to begging. Cicadas send their vibrating love song up against the dimming of the day. A carpenter bee lands on the porch. A small flame burns on the evening altar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Parthenia. It occurred to me as she was reading that early poem with the image of the prayer beads in it that it's a good metaphor for the way that Parthenia reads. It's as if each poem has a different bead on the prayer chain, and the spiritual nature of her poems kind of takes you theme by theme as you go through it, and you're in a very different place at the end than at the beginning. So thank you. Are your stomachs rumbling? Well, hold on for just a minute. Poetry is intense. Sometimes the density of the language and the intensity of the themes and the images takes some time to digest. So I promise we'll give you one more poet and then we'll have a break, a little digestion period to think and hear other things, and then we'll come back for a little more. Sally Ashton is a poet, writer, teacher, and since 2004, editor-in-chief of the DMQ Review, an online journal featuring poetry and art. By the way, the new edition has just gone online, and it's beautiful. Check it out. She is the author of 3 poetry collections, These Metallic Days, Her Name is Juanita, and most recently, Some Odd Afternoon. She taught in the Disquiet International Literature Program in Lisbon, Portugal, and teaches at San Jose State University, as well as private workshops. Please welcome Sally Ashton.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for coming. Just to kind of continue in the line of thank yous for a moment, I do want to, first of all, take an opportunity to thank the County of Santa Clara for giving me the honor and privilege of serving the county in this capacity. It's been a wonderful 2 years of very rewarding work, getting to know the various communities and the people in them. So thank you for that honor. And then next I'd like to thank the City of Cupertino for hosting such a fabulous event so well, and it feels very graciously hosted. And thanks to Dave Denny for acting as our host and commandeer of the herding the cats situation that you must imagine getting 5 poets in a line might be like. I also feel very indebted to the group of poet laureates that I've been overlapped with serving and the community that has provided. And lastly, for all the poets in the audience who I know, friends and students, your poetry has just given me so much energy over the years and been a great part of the engine that has enabled me to work as poet laureate. While I'm on the topic of poet laureate, I just wanted to reiterate the announcement. After a kind of a brief hiatus, my term was up at the end of March, my final responsibilities through April, and the county postponed the search for my replacement, and the search will begin as of August 1st and run until September 30th. So we have a lovely flyer that you will find back on the table. If you're interested, if you can think of someone who's interested, my feeling is if you feel at all drawn or curious, why not apply? It doesn't cost anything. Let someone else make the decision, right? It's a great adventure. So be looking for those flyers. Again, the search will begin, or they'll be starting to take applications as of August 1st, and those can be found online. Do get the flyer, which will have those details. All right. So each one of us, I guess, as you have likely picked up, wrote a little bit of an introduction to our selection of poems. Everyone took a different tact. That was the beauty of our editor, Nils. He just said, do whatever you want. We don't all have to be the same. So they're all quite individual. And I was looking at this collection as not a souvenir, there was a better word, and it just went out the window, a kind of a memorabilia for the time that I spent as poet laureate. So I wanted to choose poems that to me reflected both what I was thinking about during this time, what I felt like I was called or tasked to do in this regard in terms of how I view poetry that is written in the Santa Clara County, as well as choosing some pieces. So these are pieces that have chiefly been published during my tenure and not including, for the most part, pieces found online. Quite often your poems get published in little isolated journals. Maybe your mother sees them, and if you don't keep reading them, then they kind of, get a little dust on them. So that's what you'll find in my section. I'm appreciative for Parthenia to have defined the word ekphrasis for you in terms of poetry that's written in response to art, and I tend to do that as well. I'm going to start with a couple of poems that, to me, what I'm really interested in terms of poetry for our contemporary time and place, that celebrate, much as Cupertino's banner says, creativity. And I'm really interested in how the similarities of creativity between artists and the technology and the inventors of our area. We have such a wealth of invention going on. So the first couple poems are kind of straddle both of those. The first is written in response to at the Tech Museum, Leonardo 500 Years into the Future. And I was just kind of floored. He's a fabulous artist, but he was also an inventor. And the exhibit was full of everything he invented. So the things that I mention are all things that Da Vinci himself invented. It's called The Book of the Elements of the Machines. Leonardo recommends gears, crank, pinion, the toothed wheel and rack, also ratchet wheel, pulleys and pulley blocks, axles of all sorts. To animate the landscape, copy it. Find equilibrium in a bird's flight. Joints and hinges resemble what they imitate. Crank to crankshaft, flywheel, spring. Study the leg joints, stand in a far field. Use the 10 offices of the eye. Cams, levers of every kind. Chestnut, elm, oak, and ilex. I am mirror writing with my left hand. Chains, belts, rotating air screw, a study of light and shadow. The unwritten treatise on water. Anatomical aerodynamics sketched from a bird's wing. Cantilevers, cadavers. Cold muscle flayed under the knife. Archetypal geometric forms, the mental discourse of paint layered image upon image. The heart is a furnace. It burns air. We will walk on water. The second piece is taken from a photograph you can Google online. It's a picture of Einstein playing the violin. And Einstein felt if he wasn't a scientist and a mathematician and every other thing that he was, that he would love to have been a concert violinist. And so he played the violin and actually solved problems as he was playing the fiddle. Well, I think it was the violin. And so, and also Steve Jobs said if he wasn't the inventor he wished he was a poet. So there is an interesting correlation in the creative spirit. Einstein's violin. He tucks it under his chin, raises bow to string, the fingerboard running straight from cheek into the palm of his cupped left hand. Cochlea, clavicle, each fingertip curves, some for the balance of the bow, others poised on the strings. So much curled into the minute before music begins. He cocks an eyebrow toward the music stand, finds his place in the lines and spaces. The intervals of sound, like distance and time, paused. He scans the patterns of notes, the signature, the notation, a specific gravity. Down bow and the universe, moving in one direction, feels the pull in another. Sound expands, reverberates, notes improvising some rhapsody, harmonies he hears the way he sees the nature of energy, vibrating. He taps his foot, keeping time. For something of a slightly different nature. Recurring Nightmare, and I wanted to read this one. It was published, first published in the Red Wheelbarrow, which is a publication of De Anza College right here in Cupertino. So, Recurring Nightmare. One day, a beetle discovered he had a woman in his ear. He shrieked, shook his head, and waved his antenna, frantic to dislodge her. But no, when he cocked his head, he still heard her scratching around inside. Get it out of my ear. He spun in a circle on the linoleum, his 6 black legs slipping and clicking. He cocked his head. He thought he could hear breathing. I'm not coming out, he heard. Ah, what are you doing in there? He scooted backwards until his abdomen struck the baseboard. Be careful, I'm having a baby, she called. He combed his forelegs over his head, desperate to find his ears opening. All became quiet. Then, from somewhere in his head, a small cry. The beetle shuddered, rolled onto the hard shell of his back, rocking slightly, and died. the new mother found he made a handsome cradle. All right. So this is a how-to poem. Sometimes we write how-to poems. And along lines of technology, I realized how to wind a watch. I mean, how much longer is that going to, are our children going to know how to wind watches? I don't know. How to wind a watch. First, you must. Do not be afraid to assist. Take it in your hands, a little wheel for turning pinched, finger and thumb. The pitch and yaw, a simple, obsolete technology you will never forget. The wheel is on a stem. The stem cannot be plucked. Pull and move the hands of time. It is not absolute, you must remember. Motion affects the intervals. Go back in time. Manipulate its mechanics. Hand is the root of manipulate. Oh, hand me the watch, I'll do it. All right. I think one more. Yeah, okay. So the last one I want to read is called Lunch with a Famous Poet. And this is taken from true life. No, I won't tell you the famous poet. But part of one of the aspects of being a poet laureate is that you've had some experience working in the public realm. And so I was working with Poetry Center San Jose in the programming, and one of the perks is that you get to pick up the poet from the airport and take them out to lunch or dinner or whatever it is. So I was thinking, aha, now's my chance to have this guy alone. Lunch with a famous poet. And after we'd finished the bread, the wine, the plates of ravioli and brown butter sage sauce, and I had smiled through his stories, and he'd politely answered my questions about getting published. He didn't like my manuscript's title. There was a strange pause before he asked, carefully, whether there was a Foot Locker shoe store in town, and I'd answered carefully, yes, and he'd explained how a cat at the house where he'd stayed the night before flying here had peed in his shoes, his only pair, and I'd understood he was wearing them right then. They were under our table near mine. So I agreed to take him shopping before the reading to Foot Locker, where he chose optic white athletic shoes to wear with his brown pants and dim rumpled jacket. I did point out a dark pair, but no, he preferred white, though he said he wasn't quite sure whether these fit right, and then stood as my sons once stood, hands hanging, staring at his feet. So what else but to kneel and press my practice thumb into the toe of the new size 13.5 shoe he would wear on stage later that night? After that, I knew I'd learned a lot about poets and the art of the business. I did change my manuscript's title, which I've just remembered was called Don't Look Down. He'd said it made him want to look down. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. For those of you who may be wondering, the nearest Foot Locker is right around the street at Valco Shopping Center. Cupertino aims to please. Sometimes when Sally reads, I feel a little disoriented, but in a good way. You know how some poems will do that. They shake you because they have their own world, and it sort of amazes me the way she creates a world in 150 words or whatever it is. So after I get used to being disoriented and get used to the world in which the insect can have this sort of relationship or whatever the world might be, I find myself liking that world and getting reoriented to it so that when we come to the resolution, I'm in a place where I'm kind of wishing that I lived inside her poems. And it just so happens you and I can do that because right over here at this table, you can read more Sally Ashton poems for the bargain price of $10. We're now going to take our 15 minutes or so break. We'll have Kathleen play some music for us. There are refreshments in the lobby, and as I said, the books are here. The restrooms are on either side of the lobby. I'll come back up at the podium just at about 4:12 or so, and we'll get back into some poems. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. Make yourselves comfortable. Two more poets and then our surprise collaboration poem as our finale. This is my chance to do something I forgot to do at the beginning. I was supposed to add this into my comments. Those of you who are kind enough to buy yourself a copy will notice that Nils, since he is the one who really has got this project going, wrote us a beautiful little introduction, and I'd like to just read that, if I may, before we get back into the poems, since it really kind of ties things together thematically. As we said, there are really 5 different voices in this book, and to put us together in the same room creates a different atmosphere. And so here's Nils's introduction. Theseus famously says in A Midsummer Night's Dream that the imaginations of the lunatic, the lover, and the poet are made of the same stuff. There is truth here. One must be a little mad to face the infinite space of a blank page. One must love the world to want to catch a bit of it, to prevent it from disappearing into the great slough of the past. And one must be madly in love with words to spend hours listening to them sing, hoping they'll join hands in the dance of a line. He goes on to say that as the poet's imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. So a poem is a local habitation, and this book, too, is a local habitation, an anthology where the poems of the 5 poet laureates of Santa Clara County 2009 to 2014 have gathered together to rub elbows with each other and talk. The conversation is good, if we say so ourselves. You'll enjoy listening in. In Elizabethan England, there were so many good poets, it was called a nest of singing birds. The same is true of Santa Clara County. Here are 5 of the warblers. Thank you for that, Nils. I'll go ahead and take my turn. I'm also going to read a few poems. Oh, thank you. That's the perk of being the MC. I'm going to start with a couple of summertime poems to match our beautiful weather for today. Marc Chagall comes to Cupertino, California. Until Chagall set up his easel in my backyard, I hadn't noticed the depth of blue swirling in our sky. Until that strange little man called Chagall came, I never realized how many angels we had hiding in the tomato bushes. No wonder they're so delicious. What an impoverished life I led before Chagall cried, "How can a man live without chickens?" And now a flaming red rooster hides in the plum tree. Until Chagall showed up with his palette in hand, I never saw how much my meager barbecue resembled the Ark of the Covenant. Never knew that my cat was really a sphinx. Never heard the orchestra tuning its instruments within our redwood fence. See how my wife now flies above the rooftop? Look, the smoke curling from the chimney resembles a chorus line of Cossacks dancing the troika. Until Chagall set up his easel in my backyard, I mistook this hotbed voodoo lounge at the center of the hyperventilating universe for a bland little house in a bland little suburb in the big bland state of California. Art will do that to you if you let it. Chagall will, anyway. Very midsummer madness. The fat, slow, yellow-armored June bugs appear at our kitchen window by night every Independence Day weekend. Are they also stupid? They seem so. Keystone cops of the insect world, they bump into nearly everything. In their constant and pathological longing for light, they hit the screen, drop on their backs to the sill below, wiggle their tiny legs until they starve. I once saw hundreds of them roiling in a public jacuzzi like beetle soup. The pool boy scooped and scooped them with his skimmer. Still they kept coming, undeterred by the floating corpses of their kin swirling in the hot, frothy water, silhouetted by the floodlight, illuminating our pale legs and feet. Oh, sweet, silly June bugs, counter kamikazes. You die not to bring honor to your ancestors or descendants, but only for mad love, over the top, out of control, gotta have it, take me Jesus, love of that wonderful hypnotic light. They're about to come back. You know, brood 2 of the cicadas are arising from the soil on the East Coast, and they'll be singing for just a couple of weeks, and the June bugs will no doubt invade us pretty soon. Something a little bit different. I want you to remember as I'm reading this poem that it has nothing to do with river rafting. Okay, maybe a little. The river guide as marriage counselor. As we climbed into the raft, our guide gave us the talk. Whitewater rafting, he said, is the most exciting sport there is. The thing to remember is that it's all about peaks and valleys. The peaks are thrilling and the valleys are dull, but the key is to see it all in one piece. It's a Zen thing, he said. He pushed our raft out into the current and took his place in the rear. Pointing us downstream, he said, "When I say forward, that means paddle together, in tandem, as a team. Watch your partner, row together. When I say back, plant your feet under the lip of the raft there and dig the oar into the water like a shovel into gravel. Lean into it hard, lean from the hip. When I say stop," he said, "your oar should be in the air, just like you're raising your hand in school. There's nothing to it," he said, "so long as you see whatever happens as part of the same picture. Watch the river. Be alert." We were out into the middle of the river now, floating calmly. We could hear the rapids up ahead like distant applause. He said, "When we hit the class 4s and I say, hang on, I mean grab the handle there and lean towards the center. 2 things will happen. When we top out," he said, "the river will lift our nose. All you'll see then is the sky. The thing to remember is where there's a top, there's a bottom, and when we drop down into the soup, you'll feel a long slide. All you'll see then is the foam. Don't relax your grip during the slide because you're about to hit bottom. If you pop out of the raft, the icy green splash will numb you if you let it. Don't. Point your feet downstream," he said, and hold on to your helmet. The important thing is not to panic. Keep your mouth closed, breathe through your nose. If you get sucked under, he said, try to get a breath and relax and go with it. If you fight the current, he said, you'll lose. This river has been here longer than you, and this river will be here after you're gone. He snapped his helmet into place. Then he said, are there any questions? I sometimes write poems in other voices, and one of the voices that I write in is kind of an alter ego. He's not like me at all because he's such a smartass. My wife will tell you that's not me at all. Ever. No smartass. And sometimes I use this voice to talk to characters in movies or books. So this is called Hamlet on the Ash Heap. And it begins with an epigraph from Act 1, Scene 2, in which Hamlet, in a pretty serious state of depression, says, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Claudius was right about one thing. The clouds still hang on you, young prince. It's been more than a while now since my own father died, and the bright, colorful dream coat the world once slung so cavalierly over its shoulder still lies in the mud. What can you do? Get over it, say Mom and Uncle Claude. It's been a month, after all. We've moved on. Why can't you? You, with your dark moods, remind them in moments undulled by drink that they, too, balance on the battlements, and at any time they might fall or be pushed to their end on the rocks below. This life is all about grief, is it not? There's Job sitting on the ash heap after losing everything, wishing he'd never been born, the bitter voice of his wife pleading for him to curse God and die. How long did he sit there after all, before his three useless friends dragged him off to the land of existential debate? If Beckett had written the story, he might have shown a queue of similar losers next to the ash heap, with clothespins on their noses and numbers in their hands, like at the deli counter. And Job, as he finally rose, might have muttered, "Next." There is no voice in your whirlwind, Ham. And it's annoying to have you moping around the castle in your black leathers with your Nietzsche tucked under one arm, mumbling about slings and arrows, bare bodkins and unweeded gardens. You with your PBS conscience. Hike up your tights and pay attention. Your choice is ours. We must either act or die. You may have heard this somewhere before, maybe in a John Ford movie. Dying is the easy part. Here's my last one. This is a birthday poem to Vincent van Gogh, who is now 160 years old. And I wrote this poem 2 years ago when he was just a strapping lad of 158. And I think for 160, he doesn't look a day over 158. So I'm not going to change the title. I'm just going to leave it. It's called To Vincent on his 158th birthday. After a long, wet, dreary, dark, lonely, sickly winter, spring has finally arrived. I'm sitting at a cafe table with a boiled egg, cheese, and fruit. For the first time in months, my head is clear and my heart is content. I hiked up to Hunter's Point yesterday. Remember the hawks we watched up there last summer as they rode the wind currents along the hillsides? One flew directly at me, then glided over close enough that I could see the black and white pattern on his tail feathers and the shock of red around his shoulders, close enough to meet his eye before he soared over into the ravine, where he circled a while, finally perching atop a tall pine. I didn't have to wish you were there, Vincent, because you were. Just as I have stood beside you in certain wheat fields, looked over your shoulder at bouquets of sunflowers, sat on a straw-bottomed chair in a bright, spare, crooked bedroom. These moments draw most of the poison out of the wound. In time, the wound heals over. A scar toughens the flesh on the outside, while with luck and work, the soul softens within. Some of the poison lingers in the bloodstream. Eventually, it will hit the heart like a clot. Until then, we have the cafe table in the shade, the hawks on their winding paths, the pictures that invoke beatific light, even those lit only by pale stars and a withered moon, especially those. Thank you. Here comes our cleanup hitter. And after Erica, we will all arise, and you'll give us hopefully a little bit of leeway while we decide the order of the final poem. We actually haven't done that yet. Nils has the magic cards with our numbers on them, and we will put ourselves in an order and read to you our original poem, Local Habitations. But before we get there, Erica Goss is the Poet Laureate of Los Gatos, California. She won the 2011 Many Mountains Moving Poetry Contest. Her chapbook, Wild Place, was published in 2012 by Finishing Line Press. Please welcome Erica Goss.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Yes? Okay. So when Sally said that Steve Jobs wished he was a poet, I was thinking, if I wasn't a poet, I think I'd rather be Steve Jobs. Really, don't you think? I would give all that money to the arts, and then I would just sit there and watch it grow. In the weird world of Poets Laureate, it's Poets Laureate. I told my 8th grader today, Moms, why isn't it Poet Laureates? And I said, I don't know. I don't make the rules, but it's Poets Laureate. So he shrugged his 14-year-old shoulders and walked off. Like, whatever, Mom, you're so weird. But in the weird world of PLs, or is that P's L? I'm the incumbent Poet Laureate of our gang. I've only been Poet Laureate since January of this year. And pretty soon, we'll have a whole bunch of new Poets Laureate, and I'll be the old person who knows how this works. So I'll have to learn how to fake it better, I think. This is a great event, and I'm so happy to be here. And I was remembering that a long, long time ago, I was a student in Nils Peterson's American literature class, and we're both, as you probably have noticed, we're pretty tall. And I was sitting in one of those little chair table things that they force you to sit in even as an adult, and I could not get my legs to fit underneath this thing, and I was like doing this, and I was stretching them out this way, and finally I just, squatted in some uncomfortable way. And as I gathered up my books and left the class, Mr. Peterson looked over and said, "It's hard to be tall, isn't it?" And ever since then, we've been bonded. I'm like, yes, you are my people. So I'm going to start with, and I have to write a poem about being tall. I think I will. I have made many attempts. I'm going to start with a poem about an experience I had when I visited my Heimat, Germany, a few years back. In front of the Reichstag. When he stood here in 1956, my father decided to set his life to music. American jazz, the language of home. To learn forgiveness, listen to the blues. 50 years later, I step across the mended street to read about the girl who bent herself into a quarter note and escaped to the west, wedged into a stereo cabinet, her body twisted like the fossil Archaeopteryx. She was so small, a gamine, airy as the swan-bone flute, dug up in the Hohlefels cave from which the oldest music comes. Where else did the children hide, crammed into cello cases, coiled into drums, as the little birds of Berlin called out in tones of gold and mercy? These next two poems are about, well, let me read this one. This is, you know how when you have a sudden emergency, but when you look back, you can see this emergency has been building for some time, but all of a sudden, it is now an emergency. And I don't know about you, but I always have the urge to give blood. I'm like, I'll give blood, and that will make it better. And I was with my father in the hospital, and he was having what appeared to be a heart attack. And I thought that if I gave blood, that would be, a useful thing to do. But the doctor said, no, ma'am, we just want you to sit here and be quiet while we deal with your father. And that's where this poem came from. It's called Phase. It started in the morning when my father's heart wobbled like the eccentric moon. The doctors, wiser than they looked, refused my blood offer. Spinning away from me, he landed on a bed as wide and empty as a lunar sea. All that pale afternoon, I listened to the deep space sounds of the hospital. At 4 o'clock, my father sat up, scattering blankets and trays, sending instruments into panicked stacks of red lights, swung his numb legs off the bed, and I felt the weight of things falling, a hammer, a feather, waves, and my own blood, which I could not give away. I'll read two poems about something that I'm very familiar with, and that is insomnia. What would you give? The fairies know about trades. They don't ask for money, land, or fame. They want a voice, a lock of hair, an invitation to the party, to eat from your plate. They circle the bed just after moon sets, making offers for a few minutes of sleep, some herbs from the garden, for an hour, my little dog, for a whole night. They really need my two strong young sons. Bringing on sleep is not easy, and I'm a particularly hard case. Cut my herbs, the more you take, the better they grow. My little dog will soon return to me. But I am not so broken, nor so deprived, to trade my children for your magic. Not yet, the fairies reply, but after a week, black holes open up before you. After a month, shadows take human shape. No one lasts a year, no one. This one's not so dark. It can end happily. 2 a.m. Sleep ends, percussive, final. I don't speak, try not to think, but sometimes I just need a good story. Once, a woman asked 25 Catholics what they thought heaven would be like. She got 25 different answers. When my husband was a boy, he broke a flask of holy water. The glass cut through his small hand, lodged in the bone, leaving a Y-shaped scar thick as rope. The night, ribbed like corduroy, leaves marks on my skin. No one calls me, no child cries, why this vigilance? I rub my cheek against the night. Heaven is one enormous national park. It smells like childhood. The prince waits patiently until Sleeping Beauty wakes, even if it takes 100 years. I kiss my pillow. This poem is about, you guys seen the guy? He's in every town. He has a tricycle and a big billboard, and it says, "Repent before it's too late." I swear, he lives in every town. He even lives in Europe. He lives in Asia. He lives all over the world. This is a poem called "Like the Man Who Fell in Love with Jesus." I want to live in a body that quakes. I want someone's fingers to press marks into my flesh. I want to open the blue door of my heart and let the wolf in. I want to be in a room gradually filling with water. I want to stand on a corner and testify like the man who fell in love with Jesus. I want to breathe and breathe. I want to know what the other 90% of my brain is for. I want to find out where my dreams are filed. But summer is going faster than it came, and every day I wade through load after load of leaves collected in scarlet puddles below the shameless trees. Let's see. I think I'll read my last poem, or next to last poem. What do you think? Okay, this is my next to last poem. I was raised by very frugal people. They could not let anything go to waste. We do not waste things in my family. Yes, my mother did take things out of the trash and put it back on my plate. You will eat that, young lady. Thanks, Mom. I just want everyone to know that I torture my children in the same way. So this is the result of my having picked way too many pears and they were free, right? And then I had to do something with them. Afternoon in the shape of a pear. 100 pounds on the kitchen counter, shoulder to shoulder like sweet, lumpy trolls. I touch each one, feel hidden seeds moving, and the hairy tickle of the blossom ends. Something so bland takes sharpness well. Blue cheese, the paring knife. Perishable flesh glowing like pearl leaves sugary grains under my fingernails. In its lopsided heart, a lute-shaped crater hides the worm who, though blind, knows the importance of being first. Alrighty. I got a poem out of it, so that was great. And 40 jars of canned pears. If you want some, come on over. I have lots. Alrighty. This will be my last poem, and it's a true story based on an experience I had when I was a teenager camping on the beach in Baja, California. It's called Noche. Once in Mulegé, Jose's father drove me back to the long beach coated with the moonlight. Fish lingered in black water, suspended on their plastic bones. The boat rocked slowly, chipping blue paint into the swells. 2 naked boys floated by in a canoe, quietly laughing. At sunset, fishermen had pulled a turtle from the sea and laid her on her back. She took 3 hours to die, flippers tracing circles in the air. Jose's father let me out and drove back to town. I sat in the cool sand and stared at the charcoal outlines of mountains. Turtle meat is pearl-colored. It leaves a film of oil inside the mouth. All night, the taste of the sea rolled over my tongue. When the moon set, I saw star after star streak the dark with white fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I'm suddenly hungry for pears. Erica's book is called Wild Places, and what you realize as you read through it is that the heart is a wild place. And I'm really grateful that she hasn't tried to tame it. Mary, could you bring up the roses for me that are in the back vase over there? I want to transition now. First of all, say thanks to my 4 colleagues, my 4 friends, the Laureates 5, I guess we can call ourselves now, and we'll now do our doo-wop poem up here. So come on up here, gang, while I say a few words and we'll organize ourselves. I also want to thank Kathleen Peters for serenading us this afternoon with her beautiful harp. Thank you so much. This is Mary Spagnell, and in the back is Adrian Kolb. These 2 volunteers have really done everything you see, just about, along with the city. I want to thank them both. Organizing our refreshments, selling books, and keeping this whole thing going. As I've told them both, I could do this without them, but it would not be nearly as much fun and it would not be organized at all. So I owe all that to them. Okay, we're going to draw our numbers. I get one. Okay, I've drawn the look. It turns out I've got the number 1, so I guess I'm the leadoff hitter for this, which is appropriate. Now, as I said, this is about as spontaneous as we're going to get. We were each given the task to write 100 words on the topic of local habitation. So what you're about to hear is totally fresh and new, world premiere and all that. And we will each come up in the random numbers that we've been given and read our section of the poem. Jacaranda is the tree for us, twice blooming in our region, a bold and fragrant purple in spring, a paler but somehow richer blue in autumn. Turn any corner in our neighborhood and see them lined along the parkway in a conspiracy of beauty. So we, in our youth, were given to the brave pose or the startling proclamation. And now we have, how shall I say it, deepened, taken on a subtle complexity we could not in spring have imagined. How lovely and strange to find ourselves in this changing light. We pull the car over to the curb to gawk in silence. The tree for us is Jacaranda.
They say we have no seasons in California. Fall, for instance, fails to please. They want trees decked out in garish tones and frost to grow on pumpkins like mold on bread. Perhaps it seems that summer will never end as heat swells the Pacific and small clouds collect in the uncertain sky. The land, a little shabby from summer's long dormancy, will never look like the soft hills they left, thinking that they wanted this much sun. Now it's old news, and they long to know that change is coming, impatient to dig out their woolen sweaters.
Thank you.
The old tree in Willow Glen cracks across the sky. The sound so loud and close, everyone looks up, but no one moves. It takes a visitor, a quiet, shy voice to speak the word, run. Branches we love to call arms, always heavier than we think, fall everywhere. Reach for people, dogs, bits of food, benches, corners of blankets, and finally rest, dangling like slings between cars and high wires. Why not now, she thinks. Now, when the people are so close and the sky is so blue, and a lovely visitor with a soft voice has recognized me.
A small bang, syllables pour into 100-word universe shocked as the first hydrogen atoms. Each has a music. They circle, join, suddenly word sounds. Crew went the curlew as it flew in a curlicue. They rhyme. Ache did pairs with naked. They gather into galaxies. He did not know who he was until she taught him desire, and then he did not know who he was. Until here, in Cupertino, at the end of the dictionary of the Milky Way, we dangle from a participle, aware of dark matter, what has not yet been seen, so not yet said.
Thank you, Nils.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've never been hugged by someone so tall. It's lovely. Thank you.
The first time I ever danced with a girl as tall as Erica and had lipstick on my sweater, it was one of those great moments in my life.
Home. My grandfather would have sized up this crowd with 2 words: local yokels. When a stranger moves to town, we call him immigrant. If we move to a foreign country, we call ourselves expats. To travel from one place to another, we lock our houses first. To dream, the mind throws the doors open wide. Either way, we leave what we know behind. To know ourselves better, we've unlocked the genome. We discover we're related to everyone, everywhere. We are also made of star stuff blown from the corners of the cosmos. Therefore, wherever we wander, we're home.
What a beautiful way to end. Wow, almost like we planned it. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Please hang out and finish the cookies, have as much as the tea and coffee, whatever you would like. We will also hang around to visit for a little while. Thank you so much from the 5 warblers to you all. Love you.